Here we are. So
We're live. Okay.
we are indeed live. And hello to any viewers out there in cyberspace. I'm recording from Kentucky on the afternoon of April 15th, 2020. My name is Jerry Salyer. I'm a liberal arts educator and freelance journalist. And what you're watching is an installment of a series that we've got a working title of it called the Athens-Jerusalem Dialogues. And in this series, I try to find interesting intellectual figures and discuss current events, political theory, culture and religion, and so on with them. Today, it is my great privilege to have as my guest Mr. James Kalb of Brooklyn, New York. Mr. Kalb is a lawyer and independent scholar and Catholic convert. He holds degrees from Dartmouth and Yale Law School, and his columns have appeared in a wide variety of outlets in print and online. And he is also the author of two books that I call everyone's attention to. One of which is the first of which is The Tyranny of Liberalism. Hopefully that's coming up on your all screens there, The Tyranny of Liberalism. And then the other one, I actually have my copy handy, is Against Inclusiveness. And I do recommend both these books. So, Mr. Kalb, welcome. Welcome.
Okay. Well, it's good to be talking with you.
Yes, yes. So I do hope everything's well with y'all up in New York. We've seen some pretty troubling images down here. Hopefully you're doing well.
Yeah, we're fine. Sort of lying low and acting misanthropic, but otherwise, it's spring now, and we get out for walks and do the things we usually do at home. So it's not so bad from our standpoint.
Good, very good. I'm glad to hear it. So since the coronavirus is on everybody's minds right now, I thought we'd start by talking about maybe a dimension or I'd like to ask your thoughts about a dimension that gets overlooked. I mean, there's a lot of people, understandably, give a lot of attention to the folks who've come down with it and all the suffering that it causes, and of course, obviously, that's very important. And also, there's a lot of people who have looked at the economic impact, unemployment, and so on, and that's also very important too. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on maybe any sort of cultural or spiritual impact of this thing, like something we should think about and be aware of. You joke about being misanthropic. I kind of wonder if, well, I don't know, for some people that might really become a thing.
Okay. I don't know. I think it's realizing, making people realize they do like seeing other people. It's anything that throws you out of your usual schedule. Gives you reason to think about, what you've been doing, what your life is like, and what it's really all about. That's and when an unexpected situation comes up, things come out. Like one thing that's a little bit bothersome is that the response of the church. You get the impression that it's like a bureaucracy from a sociological standpoint. They don't take their own beliefs all that seriously.
Huh.
Why isn't it a more desperate cause, for example, to get priests the people who are in hospitals and dying? There'd be some way of doing that. It seems to me what they do is as important as what a nurse does. But that simply hasn't been the approach they've taken. So in general, the response has been that, all this religion stuff, it's a personal spiritual practice. And it's all very nice, but it's really part of the, sort of ornamental, dispensable side of life. It's not really a serious thing, unlike, going to a liquor store or whatever.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if it's if there's some danger, and you'll have to do some thinking about how to reduce the dangers. Then well, let's do the simplest thing, which is just stop doing it. And that's about um, in general. It sort of confirms that when something happens, stepping back from the religious side on the political and social side, it sort of shows that whenever something happens, it proves to everybody that they were right all along. You know, it's because if you think that the problem is globalism and immigration, then this proves it. If you think the problem is racism and not taking science seriously, well, this proves it also. If you think the problem is that the government doesn't run everything and the government should run everything, then this proves that the government should run everything. And we should have somebody different running the government, who's one of our guys, from the standpoint of people who say this kind of thing. And if, like me, you think this is a big problem with, highly complex centralized systems which are monolithic in the sense that every part depends on every part, so that when something goes wrong everywhere, the whole thing becomes discombobulated. Well, that proves that as well.
Right.
So that's been an interesting side of it, and the confirms what we've seen is that on a day-to-day level, most people are civil, social, helpful, which is what I've seen, and at the level of public life today, everybody hates everybody, and nobody trusts anybody.
Yeah.
And you have these really weird beliefs about what other people's motivations are. Like Donald Trump is pushing chloroquine because he's going to make money, or
Right.
the Democrats are pushing sheltering in place because they want to the world and turn everybody into a robotic slave. And, to some extent, that can be understood because after all, everybody believes that this kind of crisis confirms everything they've always believed, and so therefore, whatever the response will be, will line up with saying that, well, we got to do what we wanted to do all along. But even so, just the degree of not only distrust of motives, but actual conviction that the other people are really evil,
Right.
keeps sort of bothersome. But I've gone on too much, too
No, no,
long,
no.
and you might have a question
No.
or.
No. That's fascinating. Well, I mean, it's your last point. It seems almost like pessimism. I mean, there's obviously a value to kind of taking a cynical. There's a certain insight that you have, but sometimes it does seem to me that pessimism and cynicism can be almost kind of stupid. When to the point of which, yeah, no, not it's some people will say, oh, Hillary Clinton, she doesn't care at all about women's rights. It's all she. Well, I don't think she's a woman of extraordinary virtue and so on. But I suspect that if you actually met her in a private conversation, she actually does in her own, misguided way, care about, these, women's rights and whatever else.
Yeah, she might have like the wrong, like a grip on reality, and like the different sides of you, and what's at stake might be wrong, but it's not all pure cynicism and
Yes.
you just putting this up as some kind of front for something
Yes.
else, which is
Yes.
making yourself the king of the world, or whatever
Yes.
it is.
Yes, she's not back in the corner, twirling her mustache, waiting to,
No,
they've all fallen for my, yeah, and that
my
actually
little
is kind of
plan, yeah.
stupid because you don't understand how your opponent, if you don't, if you're going to function effectively, you need to understand what motivates your opponent, and they're not just, we want to destroy religion. That's not what they're thinking.
Well, yeah, and you're going to underestimate your opponent.
Okay.
Since you're going to underrate a good person as much as anybody else is, you could look at things that way, and so yeah, that's just not the right outlook to take on things. You can be somewhat cynical in the sense that you can notice that well, the answer is always to do more of what I wanted to do all
Right.
along.
Right.
But that's just the way people's minds work. I mean, if you have a basic grip on things, and if something goes wrong, you're going to say that, well, that's because the Democrats weren't running everything, and I'm a Democrat. If that's what your view of things is.
Right.
So, you take people a little more at face value than a lot of people are inclined to, I think. Although there's like multi-levels, so that I mean, you can't be simple-minded in all this.
Right. Well, and yeah, and I think, I mean, maybe that sort of insight that we just made, of yeah, taking people at face value is, I mean, it goes back to the Bush 2 era, when, the whole, oh, why did they blow up the World Trade Center? Because they hate our freedom. Like, and you're not, I mean, no, probably these people are not sitting around saying, oh, those Americans are free, let's kill. I mean, no, I mean, that doesn't make what they did any less heinous, but it's that's, yeah, I mean,
You don't
you need to
understand your
understand.
enemy.
Yes.
The what might appeal about what they're doing to somebody, and why they might keep doing it, and why when you show up in Iraq and say, okay, you guys cannot now become just like Minnesota, they're not going to say, yay,
Right.
let's do it, because that just is not the outcome.
Right.
So yeah, so it's been sort of interesting. Yeah, obviously, since public life today is kind of depressing, it's been kind of depressing too.
Yeah.
Ill temper and so on, and the assumption of bad motives, and well, I mean, specifically from my point of view, uh, whatever Trump does, it proves he's the worst guy who ever lived. It could be anything at all.
Right.
He thinks that hydroxychloroquine might work, and well, that proves that that it can't possibly work, and and that becomes a political issue, which is ridiculous. And it seems to work that way down the line. Every issue is, somehow becomes this partisan confrontation, which really should, except at the operational level. I mean, I think the administration and the governors in general have been working together pretty well, because they actually have to deal with problems.
Right. They're not as
And,
divorced from the situation.
and there's obvious problems, and they want to do something about them. Sort of current affairs show bubble, where they have a little bit of factual input, and they use it to continue whatever it is, the story that they've been telling about the world for the past few years, which is what a lot of the so-called news seems to amount to these days. So it's I mean, like every unexpected situation, it kind of reveals more about what things are like. Although there haven't been any real startling surprises.
Right. It's more of a just more extreme version of what we really kind of already
Well,
knew.
we've already seen, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to return to your remarks about, again with the church, yeah, I mean, I have to say here, and I suppose this is a touchy subject. I don't know if I'm putting this out here. I don't want, I want to, but anyways, here in our own diocese, we had a priest made a point of, he went out and he got a radio transmitter, and he set everything up so that he could do a mass that was like, it was outside and everybody be in cars. And he was actually, he did one mass, and then it was, he was told, you can't do that anymore. So, and which to me is just sort of, I mean, I do appreciate that this thing is dangerous. It's a problem, public health, of course, common good. At the same time, I mean, to me, if this, as you say, if it were a priority, all this technology we got. I mean, you're in New York and I'm in Kentucky. We're talking to each other. We have all this fantastic technology, and yet we cannot conduct, to me, yeah, if it were priority, we would be able to still have a public mass.
Yeah, well, especially in a place like Kentucky where you have open fields and you can do what the priest did.
Right.
Yeah, basically zero risk to anybody. It's just the principle of the thing. The fact that, I mean, all these people in cars in a field, well, that's like a gathering, and you can't have gatherings. So that is kind of, tyrannical and stupid. And, there ought to be more willingness on the part of the authorities to cooperate with that, on the part of the church to say that, look, this is something we take very seriously, because it seems evident from what's happened that as an institution, from a sociological standpoint, the church, meaning the people who actually run it, don't take it all that seriously. As they don't take the sacraments seriously as sacraments. They're so used to being in this secular world in which it's all just one personal spiritual practice. That's the approach they absorbed, and they naturally fall back on it when they have to deal with something at a practical level. And I think that ought to be something that they reflect on. Is this really the direction they want to be going? Is this really the state of mind that they should have cultivated?
Right. Right. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you really want a humanitarian organization, I mean, the fact is that it's kind of like with, I mean, if I wanted secular humanist humanitarianism, there's a lot of sources for that I can get it, and probably a lot better. Just even from a purely pragmatic point of view.
Consistent without all this, sort of phrasing everything in this inappropriate religious way that doesn't really cash out at the level of what you act like you take seriously.
Right. Right.
So, that has been a bother. I do hope there's some reflection at the high level. I don't know. I mean, at those levels.
Right. Do you think there's a chance of? I mean, I wouldn't say this. Obviously, hardened globalists and people like that. I mean, they're going to, that's their conviction. But among like more ordinary people, there might be an increased sense of, oh yeah, this whole borders actually matter. I mean, we've actually had discussions, I've seen this in Kentucky and other places of not even just national borders, but state borders. The idea that people are suddenly, oh yeah, I live in this particular state and that actually matters, or not. I mean, do you think that'll?
Yeah, I think the situation has highlighted that, and for sort of ordinary people with some interest in things. Yeah, that's going to carry some weight. It draws attention to the fragility of these global supply chains where everything's just in time, and another aspect of the way things are set up, the degree of debt finance, where everything depends on nothing happening to disrupt the machine, because everything is running on a fairly thin margin, and if one part goes out, then other parts go out too, and the whole thing collapses.
Right.
And that's obviously troublesome. And whether or enough people get troubled enough to do much about it, I don't know. Because at the immediate everyday level, there are obviously efficiencies in having. You get the cheapest grommet or whatever it is from China, and then you don't keep an inventory of them because you can get them in an airplane just in time, and isn't that a cheaper way to do it? But and it is, as long as nothing goes wrong. But the system as a whole just doesn't have these fallback capabilities of being able to sort of continue functioning. When you have disruptions in the web, and how that plays out is hard to predict. I mean, the tendency toward this overall rationalization has been very strong. And whether you need some major disaster that makes it absolutely impossible to carry it on to change that, I just don't know.
Yeah, hope not, but
I hope not. I mean,
right.
you'd rather everything sort of gracefully turn into something more durable, but I don't know how that happens.
It would have been nice if Saul could have gracefully converted to Christianity on his way, but
Yeah,
evidently not.
Yeah. No, sometimes you get a line of development. How does that can't continue? How does it come to an end? Well, you hope it doesn't get too disruptive, because we are all very dependent, especially in a place like New York, I gotta say.
Right. Well, yeah. We
So
just hope for the best, I guess.
hope for the best.
And yeah. Okay, well, I guess we could talk about the coronavirus all afternoon, but maybe I'll mention. I'll take a look at against inclusiveness, since I've got it handy. Maybe there's one of the quotes, just looking through it again, that I picked out, and I think this is a theme, a thread that runs through a lot of what you write, and I think a case could be made. This is the heart of what's going on, this struggle between globalism and opposition to globalism. So actually, I think I have it. Let me see if I can use my little handy high tech. Speaking of amazing technology, there we go. I don't know if you can see that. So a truly diverse, inclusive, multicultural, and multi-faith society would have too few common habits, loyalties, and understandings to function, except under mixed impulses of anarchy and tyranny. And so maybe I don't know, we could unpack that a little bit, or if you would, because I realize some viewers might sort of look at that, anarchy. I don't, what do you mean by anarchy, or also tyranny? We're living in America. We're free. We can. Nobody's. Well, of course, right now in some places they are telling you you can't go out on the streets, but generally that's not the case. So maybe you could unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, well, the basic idea is that most things can't be written down. The way life gets carried on, it's a matter of habit, of how you understand things are, of what you expect, and not only those things, not only for yourself, but for other people and your connections with other people as well.
Uh-huh.
So that you have habits in common with other people that lead to this complicated scheme of mutual expectations, and the belief you have the right to this and you have an obligation to that, and you expect other people to share that, because otherwise the system sort of grinds to a halt. And to the extent that kind of system gets developed through people living together over a long period of time, and coming to have similar views of what life is like, and what people are like, and what life is all about, and what the point of it all is, you have a common culture. That's what a common culture is. It's basically a system that grows up over time for people to live together and cooperate with each other. And of course, the idea of inclusiveness is that common culture isn't supposed to matter. And that means that instead of sort of informal expectations, which are usually pretty flexible and responsive and non-dogmatic, things have to be done by the rule book. you get more and more of life becoming either bureaucratized, because the idea is that, well, people don't know how to do things together. So you have to have some system. You got to have some system, has to have some rules, and you have to have some way of deciding what the rules are, and you have to have a process. People are going to have very different views, and you have to have ways of adjudication when there are disputes. So everything becomes very formalized, which makes it sort of inefficient and clunky, and also unjust, since it's not able to take into account particular circumstances, and it's not able to respond. And so a lot of it's going to become bureaucratized, or it's going to become commercialized, meaning money is sort of the universal principle of cooperation. If you want something, you pay somebody to do it. And if somebody wants your cooperation, well, here's my price list. And so you go from a society in which is basically cooperative and based on common loyalties and understandings, to one that's based on command and money, and everything that can't be controlled by that. People do what they do, and since they have no basis for trusting each other, the doing what they do. The general multicultural society, it's less public trust there is. The fewer effective civic organizations there are, the less people go out and have public events in common. So that's what I meant by the combination of tyranny, which is sort of blind force, because bureaucracy tries to have intelligent rules, but it just can't know enough, because it doesn't deal with particular situations. It has to have general rules that run by rules of evidence and so on. That's just, it's not a good way to generate the kind of understanding of particular situations that you'd normally expect. And the combination of that, and the combination of money, and a combination of people getting away with whatever they can get away with. And the last part of it is the anarchy part. So you really get this sort of unpleasant society, and as a practical matter, it tends to what you've traditionally found in the Middle East, which is a good example, or in border regions like the Caucasus or the Balkans, or which are Central Asia, which are border regions between civilizations, where you don't have common culture of cooperation. Instead, you have people living in walled communities, gated communities, literally. And they only come out to go to the bazaar, which is not a marketplace where people discuss things, but simply a place where people buy and sell and occasionally riot. And then there's some sort of government, which is basically military, keeping a crude type of order, and extracting as much in taxes as they can get away with. So it's not a very good way to go, but that seems to be the natural tendency of a really cosmopolitan society. It can't govern itself because it doesn't have to think about things, to have a view on things, to have a social idea of what's good or bad. So those decisions have to be made in cruder ways, through money force or people getting away with things. So anyway, that's the idea.
Sure.
That basically multiculturalism means Iraq in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, and so if culture is naturally a source of order, then if multiculturalism means that you don't have any definitive culture that can provide any that can act as a source of order, then the only order has to come from the brute power of law, I guess.
Yeah, or it's hard even to maintain it as law, because system of law requires a common legal culture, which tends to degrade if it's not part of a common culture generally for governing the whole way of life. So it's all this warm and fuzzy talk about how great it is. It's just not based in reality, in my view.
Right. Well, I mean, for that matter, I mean, we can, I guess, we can go back to, I mean, one of the big, the huge, Grand Canyon divides is the whole question of Roe v. Wade. And I guess it's always kind of struck me that, I mean, how can we talk about having a common society when, okay, yeah, everybody agrees that it's, oh, you shouldn't murder someone. Well, the problem is we don't agree on what that word murder means, evidently.
Sure, and the Supreme Court says, well, the reason we don't agree is that liberty means that everybody has his own concept of reality, and everybody's concept of reality has to have equal validity, so that not only don't we live in the same society, we don't live in the same universe, and that's a legal ideal that we have in this country now.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, why don't people notice that more than they do? It just, to me, it just makes no sense.
Right. Yeah. It's yeah. I remember a few years back, I wound up briefly talking to a fellow. He was a representative of Planned Parenthood, and I tried to bring up that point, and he was, I really don't. Yeah, I don't understand but he was really totally uninterested. He was sort of like, that's irrelevant. Whether or not this is, whether this is a human being or not is sort of, that's beside the point. Okay, well, yeah. I don't know how we can have a discussion about anything if we can't. Yeah. So yeah, it's no. Let's see. So it's
so the ideal of inclusiveness as an ideal, it's really. Are you receiving me?
Oh, I am now. Yeah,
okay.
I think something. I think because this is coming through my cell phone, I think I got a text message, and I think that might have gummed up the works. But you were talking about the idea of inclusiveness as an ideal and how that plays into this whole Roe v. Wade and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Because the same idea that everybody's world is equally valid, and so all worlds of all people have to have equal standing, and so you just can't have a common universe of discourse, a common social understandings that enable us to govern ourselves, to talk about the common good, or any of these things that you really need for a normal self-governing society. It's a radical problem.
Right, to have a society, I mean, people have to connect with each other, and the whole point is like, no, we don't. If you connect with each other, you might impose something on the other person, and so we don't want you. And yet, there's all this, and yet, strangely enough, there, the rhetoric of globalism is all, oh, we're all globally connected, and it's sort of, but I guess you'd say it's just superficial and romanticized, or.
Well, yeah, because we're connected on the basis of these extremely abstract points. Like we're all agents who want stuff and try to do stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty vague. I mean,
and therefore the point of social order is to facilitate something that people live by. I mean, that warms people's hearts. That people say, well, when I get down and I think of what life's all about, I say, well, what life is all about is people wanting to do stuff and get stuff. And that gives me the reason to go on living. I mean, that just doesn't work that way.
No. No, not at all. Certainly. Now, so I guess, yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep you too long, but I as you're talking about the question of things becoming formalized, I'm wondering, I don't want to, trigger any classical liberal viewers too much, but I'm kind of the older conception of society with patriarchy and all that sort of idea, like essentially society is a big family, and then it gets replaced by a social contract with various thinkers like John Locke. I mean, do you think that has something to do with it? Why it's I mean, other people have commented on legalism, like the West is, Solzhenitsyn talks about this, where he said, oh, the West is very legalistic. And could it be because, the contract is now at the heart of everything?
Yeah, it's part of the same idea, same outlook. The idea of the social contract as the basis of society means there's nothing higher or more authoritative than the individual will. And so the only way you really get people to connect and organized in a systematic way is to get their wills to coincide. And when the way you get people's wills, the wills of independent people to coincide is you have a contract. So therefore, the basis of society is the social contract, because people basically have nothing in common except that they have wills. And so therefore, you need a contract to get anything started at all. But then, the contract is not, mutual trust or like here's the good that the human good that they're all going for, that we all believe in, and so therefore we're going to cooperate toward that. It's that we're going to, in case of John Locke, we're going to preserve property and enable us to get more property. And the case of John Rawls, there are freedoms that we like to have. We're going to preserve those, and we're going to, provide a material and social basis for exercising those freedoms. So we're going to have a welfare state, and also we're going to prevent various discriminations and so on to keep people from doing what they want to do on an equal basis. And all that is extremely abstract and artificial. And so in order to make it concrete, it has to be worked out specifically right thing, or you do what's good, and we're all here to do the common good. No, it's not that. It's that we have the system of law that that's like a commercial contract that has lots of clauses, and that's supposed to govern everything. And so those things very much go together. The over legalization, the over commercialization, because money is the medium of contract, and the idea of freedom as everybody decides on what's good for himself and on what things really are. Like a woman decides a baby's a baby, it's a baby. If she decides it's not a baby, it's not a baby. Those things are all closely interrelated. Which is obviously a problem, because if there are so many things that are so ingrained in the current outlook and way of doing things, and they're this systematic, then what do you do about it? It becomes terribly difficult to say, well, if we win this election, then things will turn around. Well, no, because that's not going to happen. You have to have some fundamental change in fundamental outlook. So, that's one reason why, sort of adds to what seems bothersome about the way the church has been acting in the current coronavirus situation. That basically they've been saying, well, we don't take our own beliefs about the sacrament seriously. What we take seriously is what we live by day to day, and what we live by day to day. And this American society is the idea that people just have these various pursuits and this necessary stuff like getting groceries and going to the liquor store. And there's personal, psychological, or spiritual practices like getting confession and last rites when you're dying. And the first is important, so therefore everybody can agree on it. So it has public importance. And the second, is just this sort of private thing that some people pursue and some don't. So it's all up to everybody in an equal status. So therefore, it doesn't count for much when the situation gets difficult. But I guess the point I was making, though, is that obviously what we need is a basic change in direction and understanding of what life is like and what life is all about. And the church hasn't been doing much to support that as an official matter, as an official sociological matter. In its basic nature and in its teaching, it does all that. So so what's needed is that, and I hope there's some reflection about that as a result of the current dramatic situation.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I can. Yeah. Again, back to the question of we want guides for the church, and I guess we could always kind of say you can probably point to individual, either individual laity or individual priests and pastors who are kind of, I guess, they're acting as the points of light. Just
of course, obviously, always.
Right.
Yeah, always. And at some point, I think that will bear fruit and start multiplying. But
it would be nice if they were getting some support from the top.
Right, yeah. And the people at the top would reflect more about what they're really here for, and whether it's really to be part of this great American enterprise of individual freedom and prosperity and security.
Right.
Is that what life is about, according to the Catholic faith, or according to any sufficient human understanding of what life is?
Yes, according to any tradition other than liberalism, in other words.
Because the liberal tradition is just not very sustaining.
Right.
The idea of the highest good being, getting what you want and having everybody approve it. Well, is that something to live by when things get difficult? It doesn't seem so.
Right. Well, maybe one. While we, I don't want to overpress our luck with the connection here. So maybe one more. I'll just go with one more of the many questions that I'm looking at here. Let's see. Oh, well, I mean, this is one that I think we could chew on. So from you had a recent article again. A theme that I think you is that we can you touch on this theme in many places, but in Catholic World Report you had an article about love, loyalty, and justice, and I registered this. You actually you touched on some publications that I hadn't actually, to be honest, hadn't read, but John Paul II. I guess he's very iconic. For those of us who are a certain age, like he's an enormously iconic figure, and it interests me that he said a lot of stuff about nationhood and nationality, which I don't. I mean, I certainly until 2016, I didn't hear this really echoed at all in like Catholic intellectual circles. Now, it's still kind of just a little bit. So I wonder if you could talk about John Paul II and his interest in nationality and nationhood.
Well, partly, yes, we all know he's Polish.
Yeah, right.
And so that he is part of this nation that was caught between the Germans and the Austrians and the Russians, and of course, it disappeared at the end of, as a nation, separate nation, at the end of the 18th century. It was divided up and among those three countries, and then stayed divided up. And as time went by, the especially in the middle of the last century. Things got worse and worse because it was independent for a while, and then Russia and Germany came back, and uh, I think they killed like 20% of the population. It was really horrible, especially the German occupation. Uh, uh, so and anyway, he had that gave the Poles, I think, a real appreciation of nationhood. That they have this way of life that's a heritage from their ancestors that's valuable, and having that is not an attempt to the point is not excluding somebody else. It's having something valuable, a way of carrying on life that carries forward traditions that tell people, here's how you can live well. Here's the marriage customs, which make marriage something concrete and beautiful, and that guide people toward it and help them sustain marriages. And here's his various other customs, these customs of worship that, as a practical matter, you need more than the bare doctrine of the church. You need all sorts of habits and practices that bring it into everyday life and attach it to the affections and habits of the people, and then various civic memories of past heroes and what they had done, and all these things people need in order to have worthwhile, let alone admirable life together. And the history of Poland, uh, I think, really made that clear to the Poles, including John Paul. And so when people in Poland were getting fed up with communism, as John Paul said it was because communism just had a bad anthropology. It didn't understand human beings. Part of what they turned to was the Polish nation, not as this aggressive force that was going to conquer the world instead of having the communists conquer the world, but as something that offered a more humane, a freer, a better alternative to how you order life than this theory that, well, there's material realities and the working class has to overthrow their exploiters and then they'll run everything and build up productive capacity so everybody will be well off materially. And no, that isn't really what it's about. You need something much more concrete and specific and connected to a transcendent view, like the Catholic Church as it was in Poland, rather than something totally this worldly, as communism was. So it gave him a great appreciation, and that was reflected in a bunch of his statements, pretty explicitly. Now, he was a very ardent man in all sorts of ways. So he also said very enthusiastic things about immigration,
Right.
which I don't think fit together very well. He's he was big on outreach, and that seemed to apply to outreach to points of view as well as you visit every country and you get down and kiss the ground and that sort of thing.
Or the Quran, as the case
The
may be.
Quran, yeah, well, that's another example. I mean, outreach to what is good in the Quran, and is that a good idea to kiss it? And it seems doubtful to me. But that was the sort of thing that he would do. So that in addition to this great appreciation for the value of particular culture and what it does for people and how it enables them to live much better than they would otherwise. He also went along with other enthusiasts. So it's a mixed background. But if you look back over pronouncements of previous popes, John the 23rd, Pius the 12th, all of Pius the 11th, all of them had a strong appreciation for the value of particular nationality. that well, particular cultures are good things. Stepping back for a second, part of the one way to explain this is to say, well, Christianity is not Islam. In Islam, there's one nation, the Muslim Ummah, and all these other nations, when they become conquered, become part of the Muslim Ummah. And if you read a Pakistani account of the Muslim invasions, the we are the invaders, and the them are the people who were living in Pakistan at the time.
Right. Oh, that's
So
interesting.
yeah. So that whereas in Europe it wouldn't be written that way. I mean, even the invaders were Christian. The we would be the people living in the country, and they said, well, they brought in Christianity, and the idea is that you keep what you are. And
Yeah.
part or one aspect of the idea of incarnation and sacramentality is that things that are this worldly are basically good because God created this world. So this world is intrinsically good, even though fallen. So therefore, Christianity restores them. It makes them what they should be. It doesn't destroy them or replace them with something else. So you still have human beings acting as human beings naturally act, which is to have particular communities that are sort of sort of layered. I mean, the family, the locality, the region, the nation, continent and civilization, and Christianity accepts that because that's the natural way for human life to develop. But it doesn't change it into the single monolith of a ummah with its single code of laws, the Sharia. Instead, it transforms each of them at all levels. So you get the parish, and you get the diocese, and so on. Each of which has its own particular qualities, which is a good thing.
Right.
And it seems to me that along with many other things, as an official organizational matter, the church has been losing its appreciation of that as part of its engagement with the dominant forces, and taking on the viewpoint of those with whom they wish to cooperate, who are the dominant forces. And I think that Catholics have to step back and think about, is that really the right way to go about this?
Right, and as you say that, actually, what pops into my head is that there's one thing you could argue that liberals and Islam has in common. It's like maybe you could say it's a kind of monism, like the idea of, I mean, again, as you said, historically, I mean, a Christian looking back at the spread of Christianity might say this is when we became Christian, not when we conquered those bad people and imposed Christianity. It's when we became Christian. That monism that we see maybe in Islam is also, I think, is kind of that seems to be part of the liberal secular mindset as well. Is we don't identify with those people back then. We identify with whoever the good guys, the quote unquote good guy, as in the progressives, were.
Especially in its more advanced form, but it's clearly intended to dissolve particular loyalties. If you are the tendency to have more concern for nationality in Europe, well, that's like extreme right, and it's raises the threat of return of Nazism and all this stuff, which is ridiculous. They grossly misconstrue the facts of the matter because of this very simplified idea of what has to be the case, that it has to be the case that there's just this universal order that's obviously correct, and nothing else is even partially correct. And so therefore, the only reason that you would want to have these separations into different nations, different regions, different peoples, is hate. That's the only possible basis for it. It's an insane view that reflects a total inability to come to grips with human reality, but that is the view.
Right. And well, I guess one of the things that troubles me about a lot of the Catholic intellectual circles is it seems like there's a cognitive dissonance insofar as a lot of Catholic intellectuals are, yeah, they won't, they'll talk about family values, family, and just as teaching at a philosophy at a community college. I mean, I would argue that I've kind of seen the connection between the regnant ideology and what manifests itself on the street. Because at one point, for instance, teaching the play Antigone at the community college in Louisville, more than one occasion I've had students say, "Oh, Antigone's not a heroine. She's doing what she does. That's her brother. Those are like, that's a tie that that shouldn't matter. If she were a true
Yeah.
heroine, she would care about everybody." And based on the ideology that's floating around in the world, I actually think those kids, they're carrying it to its logical conclusion. But I get the sense that a lot of people are, they'll try to reconcile to, family value. Nation is not, but family is really like, no, they kind of, there's a connection.
Yeah, no, that's true. The whole family value thing is this it's like this arbitrary add-on in the thought of a lot of Catholics. They're secular progressives, and then if they want to be orthodox on moral questions, they have this family values business, a kind of an arbitrary add-on. And it's not really integrated with their basic grip on how the world works, what people are like. So I think what you say is very, very true. From the progressive standpoint, family shouldn't exist.
Right.
It's
Right.
it's just like friendship, which doesn't really carry any serious obligations for having serious. It's just people decide to hang around together, and well, that's okay so long as you don't get carried away and start excluding other people. But it can't have any special status because there are no special statuses.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think those students, you're right. They're just repeating what they've been told all their lives.
And being honest about it. Unlike, politicians won't, because even, the most extreme Democratic politician is not going to get up and say, well, what difference does family make? But, 18-year-old college kid, they're just going to spit out what they see.
Yeah. Yeah, the Democratic politician is going to say, well, of course, we have to have a larger understanding of the family, and which means the family has no definition. So it comes to the same thing substantively, but you do it in a way that you can be sentimental about, and so it sounds better for people like to avoid issues, which is most of us certainly.
Right. Whew. All right. Well, you know what? I think I've taken up a fair amount of your time here, and I certainly appreciate this discussion. I dare say I'll be. There was a delightful conversation. I'm probably, my wheels are starting to turn, so I'll probably have trouble sleeping for the next few nights, mulling over these things. But I surely appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, we should continue it sometime. It's sort of fun to take ideas around and get questions from different people, and how do you explain this, and so on. So it's been good.
Yeah, we're in the prototype mode here right now, but yeah, I certainly would like to do this again sometime, maybe as I work out the bugs on the technical side of things.
Yeah, technical side, and also how do you do an interview, and lots of questions. It's a definite skill,
Right. But all right, so I'll bid farewell to our viewers, and thank you all for listening. And again, this has been an installment of the Athens-Jerusalem Dialogues, and I'm here with Mr. James Kalb, author of The Tyranny of Liberalism and Against Inclusiveness. And just stay tuned, y'all, for the next installment. Thank you.